I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go.
Hey friend, Alex here, back with Audio Edges. And I'm so excited because today we are going to be processing a vocal together. We are going to start with the vocal completely raw and process it together in real time, and then take a moment to talk about what we did. But before we get started, I need to let you know about our free mixing tips and hacks guide. This is a free guide with a list of some of my best mixing tips so you can start getting results in your mixes right away. It seems like lots of you are really enjoying it and seeing differences already in your music. So if you haven't downloaded that yet, I know you're gonna love it, and the link is in the description. I'm so grateful for the likes and the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, because we have so much new content coming out like this, and I'm so excited to have you here. Now, let's get started and dive into this vocal mix. Okay, so here's how this is going to work. I'm going to go ahead and mix this vocal with you in real time from start to finish. I'm not going to do a whole ton of talking. I'm going to just focus on the vocal and let you see the process and see the moves that I'm making. From there, we'll do a quick breakdown talking about each plugin and what we did along the way to get it sounding from A to B. I think the main thing you need to know before we get started is that this is a pop vocal, so we're going to be going for a bright and compressed pop sound in order to complement this vocal so that it feels right for the style. So let's dive into this mix, and I will see you on the other side.
I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once. I told you once, baby. Once what you got to let it go. I told you once. That's what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you no. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. Baby, I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. Told you once what I know. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. I told you once, baby. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go.
All right, so you stuck with me through the vocal mix. This is what we got. Obviously, in the context of a song or working on this a little longer, we might adjust some things a little more. And this doesn't necessarily mean that this is like a totally finished vocal, but I think it's sounding significantly better than where it started as a raw track. So if you're with me, let's go through each plugin here really quick and just talk about what we did. Okay, so first thing that we heard was a resonance that was kind of around 3.8K. It was a really harsh resonance, and we just put Soothe on here to tame that a bit. We didn't dig too deep, but we definitely didn't leave much of that resonance left. We dug in, and we took it out, and we really pinpointed it here and allowed for some of the surrounding frequencies that are kind of in that harsh spectrum too to be reduced. So we targeted that resonance first. I just wanted it out of the way, so I decided to do that first. Then we just got an EQ. It's always good to do a high pass on a vocal. Typically with a male vocal, it might be around 85. With a female vocal, could be around 125, but it varies. You got to find where the end of the fundamental frequencies kind of end for each voice, and it's totally cool to just throw a high pass on there. I came back and targeted that frequency again because it was really bothering me, and I knew going into the compressor it was going to be a problem as well. So I pulled that back a little bit again, no problem, and just added a tiny little shelf here. Yeah, I went down all the way to a little bit lower than 2K just to brighten up the top half of the vocal. I didn't want to do a big brighten at this point because I wanted to do some compression first, but I just wanted to shape the vocal a little more and get it just sounding a little more bright, if that makes sense, and a little more present. So I did that with just a little bit of a shelf there. It's a little different than what you might see. Sometimes you'll see people boosting high shelves up here around 10K. That's totally cool, totally normal, and that's something that I just did a little bit later on in the process. But I brought the whole, I brought a lot of the mids and high mids out in this vocal with just a little bit of a boost there. Didn't go too crazy, just shaping it before compression. Next up, we got our compressor, and I use this as a peak compressor, just meaning that I tame the peaks of the vocal, and it's not really compressing the vocal as a whole super whole ton. It's really just taming those peaks and those transients and tucking them in before we hit our full compressor. So ratio 3 seemed to work for me. That was kind of a go-to, so I just jumped to there and I went with a fast attack, fast release, because I'm just grabbing those peaks out of the way quickly and just dealing with them so they're not distracting to my main compressor, if that makes sense. So I dialed in my threshold and we were good to go. Next up comes CLA 76. This is just an 1176 style compressor. I went with the blue version. There's also a black version, but I went with the blue version because it sometimes feels a little more gritty and aggressive and has some attitude. The black is I find it's really smooth, but you can't tell like a huge difference with something like this. So I decided to go with blue. Ratio of 4, really safe for vocals, no problem. Fast release to get that pop pumping sound. Medium attack there. And then just dialed in the input until we were hitting around, -7, -10, just on average for the vocal. Just getting a nice, great sounding analog style compression on it. Next up, what we did is the compressor, brings out some of the qualities of the vocal because it's compressing all the frequencies. It's bringing some of the qualities back out. So some qualities are really good. Some are ones that we don't like as much. This nuisance frequency came back for me when I compressed, so I pulled it out again with a little dynamic EQ. And then I noticed that this was we were getting a little bit of a nasally honky tone around 800 in here, 900, 1K. So I did kind of a wide Q reduction there, just minus 1.5, another low pass, and then I felt that it was time just about now to throw a de-esser on this. Sometimes I'll do a de-esser earlier if it's really, really essy and I don't want those to get in the way of the compressor too much. Wasn't too bad, but now it was time. Sometimes I'll even do the de-esser towards the end, but in this case, this felt like the right spot. I used the side chain to listen for the frequency that the S's felt most prominent at. I went with wide. Wide sounds pretty natural with vocals, so I went with a wide style de-esser, then just dialed in the threshold. Next up, we used multiband compression, and this pop vocal preset did the trick right away. Multiband compression on a vocal like this really gets that like pumping, super compressed pop feel. So that's what I went with here. Sometimes in some other vocals where you want to let the vocal breathe a little more, not be so pop compressed, you may not want to go so aggressive with the multiband, but this seemed to work well. And then I added that saturation, that audio destruction, a little bit of distortion. I dialed it in heavy and then pulled it way down in the mix, so we just have a mix of 4.5. Used Devil Lock from Sound Toys for that. Last step of the way with Devil Lock, it brought in a ton of lows, and I did a pretty crazy high pass here. It looks like, obviously, in the context of the song, you'll decide where the high pass is, and don't cut into the fundamental frequencies of the singer. So with this being a higher singer, this seemed to be okay in the moment. And I pulled back on that frequency again. Sometimes if you have a really bad nuisance frequency, like you guys listen to the raw vocal here, if you listen to that raw vocal, you could hear that frequency around 3.8K just really being a serious nuisance. So one thing that I had to do in this process is keep hammering it along the way so that it didn't become a problem later on. You got to be careful with that because if you do it too much, you can make the vocal sound hollow depending which frequencies you're pulling out, or you can really take away some of the presence. So I found like surgically pinpointing that one in this case and just being careful with it and listening did the trick. Last step of the way was, like we talked about earlier, adding that brightness back and A little bit of this was done earlier with an EQ, a little bit with the multiband compression, but this needed that last bit, and I used Fresh Air by Slate Digital, adding some mid air and some high air, and that was that last bit of brightness to just get this pop vocal to shine and cut through the imaginary instrumentation that is around it. So obviously, when you're doing this, do it in the context of your song, make decisions based on that. But this is just showing you a little bit of the thought process of how I typically process a vocal. The last thing we did was a couple buzzes here, and one of them was just to add some width to the vocal. We used micro shift for that. The lead vocal clarity preset did the trick right away. I set it all the way to wet so I could dial it in with my in this case, I dialed it in with the return because I sent it full send all the way to this bus. But here with the reverb, we dialed this in mainly with the send, which is something I like to do with reverbs. I just grabbed a medium length, it's called the Pop Vocal Reverb from this RC48. This is a Native Instruments reverb, and this one seemed to sound really good. This pop vocal preset has a really rich characteristic that I really like, so I just threw that on there just to add some color so we could hear what the vocal might sound like with a little bit of reverb. But otherwise, that's the vocal mix, and that's kind of the thought process of what we were doing along the way. All right, friend, you made it to the end of the video. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Don't forget to go download that free mixing tips and hacks guide. I know you're gonna love it. The link is in the description. Otherwise, I'm so grateful for the likes, the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and we will see you next time.